Good evening, everyone. Welcome. My name is Julie Shields Rutina, and I am the Director of College Planning at MEFA. And tonight you're here at our college financing webinar. And please know the webinar this evening is being closed captioned. So you'll see the text at the bottom of the screen. And I'm so glad you're here joining us this evening. So let me go through a little bit of information about housekeeping. Well, in fact, first I'll just tell you a little bit about MEFA. So MEFA is a not-for-profit organization here in Massachusetts. We've been around since 1982, and our mission is to help families plan, save, and pay for college. And so one of the big roles we play is really helping students and families learn about how to apply for financial aid and college financing, and that's what we're going to talk about this evening. But we also have many other webinars, many other topics, and lots of other information for families. So we'll share about how to stay connected to MEFA to receive all of that information. As far as housekeeping, I have muted all of you just to keep the background noise down, but please feel free to ask a question if you'd like to in the question and answer section, in the question section. And most likely at the end of the webinar, I may check during, I may take a couple of breaks and just quickly check, but probably I'll go through the slides for about 50 minutes or so, and then I will make sure to answer all of your questions. I may get to your question during the webinar as well before that. Another quick note is if you happen to be on a phone, you can just swipe one way or the other to see the presentation or see me speaking. You have the option of both on the computer, but one way on the phone. And lastly, I have uploaded a copy of the slides, so you can download those right now, or we are recording this webinar, and tomorrow I will send you the recording and the slides, so you'll have those. All right, so the topics this evening, we're going to talk about what is financial aid and what are the types of financial aid and what are the sources. And then we're going to talk about the financial aid application process. And then we're going to talk about how colleges make financial aid decisions and give financial aid offers to students. And near the end, we're going to talk a little bit about how families pay for college and learn about how you may pay for college and what the options are. And all along, we're going to give you a lot of free resources that you can take advantage of. So the types and sources of financial aid. What is financial aid? In a nutshell, financial aid is any money that you're going to receive and it's going to help you pay for college. So that's terrific. We like to say it comes in three types. The first type is grants and scholarships. And I'd say, though some people might like to define those grants as a certain type of aid and scholarships as another, they can be used interchangeably, and I have seen them being used interchangeably. Basically, it's money that the student receives and does not need to pay back. It's really the best type of financial aid. But another type of financial aid is federal work study. And that is a type of aid that the student doesn't receive upfront, but it basically means that the student will be able to get a job, most likely on campus, and be able to work during the school year and pay for miscellaneous expenses. And it really is a great type of aid because it makes it much easier for the student to get the job and to have that cash to be able to pay for those miscellaneous expenses. So, but a couple of things are in place. It doesn't come up front, and students do need to still find the job. And then the third type of aid is student loan. And many times we hear people say, student loan, that's not financial aid, that's a loan. But this certain type of loan, a federal student loan, is also included in the financial aid offer at most schools. And I'm going to show you why in a moment. That slide will come up. So then what are the sources of this aid? Really, really three and another fourth. The federal government is a very large source of aid, and there are grants, work study, those federal loans, there are tax incentives, and you can learn more about federal aid at studentaid.gov. The state government also has some aid, and we gave you that website, mass.edu/OSFA. And the colleges and universities themselves have a lot of financial aid to award to students. So I'm going to take those three first, gold, blue, green, and when you apply for financial aid using the process that we're going to talk about in a few minutes, you're applying for all of that, federal, state, and aid from the colleges and universities themselves, all in one process. The one type of aid that falls a little bit outside of that is where in that fourth quarter there where we say other agencies. So there are private scholarships out there. It could be from, the Coca-Cola Foundation or a town scholarship, things that students can find outside of the financial aid process. And most of the aid that the students will receive is through the financial aid process, but students should definitely take some time to look for outside money at other agencies. And we've given you two websites, mefapathway.org and fastweb.org. And students can go into those scholarship searches and type in some information about themselves and see if they can find some outside scholarships they can apply to. Collegeboard.org is another one. And goingmerry.org is the fourth one that I have seen lately. So students can take some time and do that. The other thing students can do is just look what I call closer to home. So talk to their school counselors, see in their towns, parents, employers, any church groups they belong to, see if they see any organization that they're associated with that offers some scholarships. The story I always tell that's true is that my dentist offers 2 scholarships to quote unquote good community servants. So as my kids were growing up and I would see that on the desk, I always made a note to say, we need to check in with that when it's time for you to go to college. All right, so I mentioned that federal student loan and why we're considering that financial aid. So look at those first 4 bullet points. The student is the sole borrower of this loan. They don't need a cosigner. There's no credit check. Part of the loan can be subsidized, meaning the federal government pays the interest while the student is in school. That's the subsidized portion. Unsubsidized means that the interest is accruing while the student is in school. And then look at that low interest rate. This year it's 2.75. So what I'd say is those qualities, the qualities of this loan make it so that it is financial aid. Normally an 18-year-old with no credit, no job on their own signature couldn't borrow a loan. So that's why this is kind of a special loan and why it's considered aid. And look over to the right, and what I would say is that the limits on these loans are also make it a kind of special. As a freshman, a student can borrow $5,500. As a sophomore, $6,500, and then $7,500 and $7,500 as a junior and senior. So if a student takes all of these federal student loans that they're eligible for, they'll graduate with about $27,000 in federal student loans. And on a regular repayment plan of 10 years, that would be a payment of about $300 a month for that student. And some students will be able to pay that. They'll be able to factor that in. They'll graduate, get a job, and be able to factor in a student loan payment like that. Some may not. Some may take a job when they graduate that doesn't pay enough to allow them to do that, or their living situation doesn't allow them to do that. And so here's where another benefit of this loan comes in. There are many repayment options, and one of them is tied to income. So if a student's income is lower, they could pay a lower monthly payment. Now, the good and bad of that is the good is then they're able to make their payments and manage their payments and pay off the loan. The bad is that it might take them longer than 10 years to pay. But students have a lot of options. So again, that's why this is financial aid. There are also some other deferment, forbearance, and forgiveness options, which also make it special. So back to that studentaid.gov, that government website, a lot of good information about federal student loans on that website. So then we mentioned that colleges have a lot of their own aid to award to students. And some of that aid is based on merit. We're going to talk mostly about aid that's based on need tonight. But there's a lot of aid out there based on merit. And what that means is that colleges want to bring in the best class of students that they can each year. And so they look at characteristics, especially academic, but also athletic, artistic, to bring in that class. And sometimes they award grants and scholarships to the students that have high academic merit or athletic merit or artistic. So there is aid like that. So sometimes students who have a great academic profile will receive more money at certain institutions. Now, a few things to pay attention to with merit aid. With the colleges, you just want to make sure is it renewable each year? Usually it is, but it sometimes is tied to a GPA or something like that. The student can continue to receive the merit aid as long as they retain a 3.2 GPA or something like that. So those are just things that the student and parent need to know. Most of the time, all that merit aid just gets factored right through this application process, admissions and financial aid. But it is good to check the college websites to make sure there's not a separate application for a certain merit scholarship. So once the student knows that they're going to apply to a college, they really should peruse that website, the admissions and financial aid websites for incoming students, to just make sure they're not missing something. And then need-based aid. Basically, that is aid awarded based on a family's financial need. And that's mostly what we're going to talk about today with completing these financial aid forms. It's a standard formula that determines that. It can include grants, loans, and work study. So how are you going to apply for financial aid? Well, the financial aid forms are available now for high school seniors who are applying to college for next year. So October 1st, the FAFSA became available and the CSS Profile became available. But the key is all colleges have different deadlines for admissions and for financial aid. So it's also very important that students look on those websites and find out what are the deadlines for admissions and what are the deadlines for financial aid, and do not miss a deadline. And most colleges have some early admissions processes, so there might be an early financial aid deadline and a regular admissions financial aid deadline. So just make sure that you keep track of that. And MEFA does have this college application manager that you can download just to stay organized, but I've seen students keep track of it on their phones, spreadsheets. I've seen whiteboards in kitchens, any way that you just keep track of those deadlines. One thing I will say, though, is that even for early admissions processes, most colleges, don't have a deadline that's before November 1st. November 1st, November 15th are common deadlines for early admissions. You should check the websites, but just know that the nice thing is if you complete those applications now in October, you watch this webinar tonight and you tell yourself, we're going to start this weekend. Then you'll just make sure that you're meeting all of the deadlines if you can get these forms done. So I like to encourage to do it early, just so that you can be relaxed about it, get the help you want, ask questions, all of that. All right. So when your student looks on college websites to see what are the deadlines for financial aid, and then they should look and see what forms are required. they're going to find that every college requires this form, the free application for federal student aid, FAFSA. Okay, so every college requires it, and the website where you complete this form is fafsa.gov. And there's also a mobile app that you can download, My Student Aid mobile app, and you can go right back and forth and complete a little on the mobile app and a little on the computer, and it seems to work fine. I haven't heard anyone complain about it. So that's great. The first step before you file the FAFSA is just to get an FSA ID, and that's the student gets one, and one parent with the student gets an FSA ID. And basically, it's just a username and a password, but it's called FSA ID, Federal Student Aid ID. And the nice thing is the FSA ID can stay with the student for years, and even when they're paying off loans, they can use that same username and password. And parents, you can keep it if you have other students and other student FAFSAs you're going to be completing, you can keep your FSA ID. So go in, set up a username and password, each of you, and then have those, and then you can go in and start to complete the FAFSA. Now you can go in and start to complete the FAFSA, but it will stop you a couple of times and say, set up your FSA ID. Another nice thing about the FAFSA is that there's something called the IRS data retrieval tool now. And so as you start the FAFSA, at some point when it's time for them to collect some information about income, it will ask you if you want to just connect to the IRS and pull in your tax data. And this year, again, if you're a senior in high school wanting to attend college next year, you're going to be using 2019 tax data that hopefully is already done. And if you are able to use the IRS data retrieval tool, I would suggest that you use it. It just makes this form very easy to complete, and also there's less chance that verification has to happen afterwards because they just know all of your information came directly from the IRS. So use that if you can. Not every family can if you've had some changes recently in the tax year. So if you can't, you just should have your tax return with you and you'll type in the information. And I actually did another webinar where I went line by line through the FAFSA. So if you want to watch that, mefa.org/events is a good place. You can watch that. And another note is that the FAFSA has to be completed every year. So what are you going to report on the FAFSA? Student citizenship status, there's an eligibility criteria there. I'll make one note. If the student is a U.S. citizen or permanent resident, but the parent is not, that's okay. The student is still eligible for federal financial aid. And the parents should just put zeros for the Social Security number there. And then a parent who's not a U.S. citizen won't be able to get an FSA ID, but that's okay. They can just print out the signature page, sign it, and mail it in to the address on the top of the page. So that's how a student whose parent is not a U.S. citizen can still apply for financial aid. And then the colleges, once you submit this FAFSA, the colleges where the student is applying will receive this aid. So you're just filling this out once and sending it to all of the colleges you're applying to. And the timing doesn't matter so much. This is a question I get a lot lately. Even if you want to start this weekend, you're getting excited, you're watching this, you're ready to go, but you're not going to send in your admissions application for a little while, that's okay. You send it to the school, things get matched up. Once you get admitted to the school, they find your FAFSA information and pull it together. Parents then complete the form with the student. So if the parents are married, including same-sex parents, those parents put their information on the form with the student. All parents who live together, married or not, complete this form. Legal guardians are not a parent, so if a student has a legal guardian, then the student will file the form on their own. Now, let's just talk a moment about divorced, separated parents. In that case, it should just be the I'm going to say quote unquote custodial parent, because it really doesn't have to do with any legal custody or anything like that. It's just the parent that the student lived with more in the last calendar year. Whichever parent that is, that's the parent that should do the FAFSA with the student. And that's it. Just because of the captions, I want to make sure that I'm seeing what's at the bottom. Okay. All right. And then again, I mentioned this year you'll be using 2019 income, and you'll be putting some asset information on the FAFSA: savings, checking, investments, other property, even 529 plans, because those are counted as a parent asset. The parent is the owner, which is a good thing, and the student is the beneficiary. Some things you don't include on the FAFSA. You don't include any information about the value or anything about your primary home. You don't include any information about your retirement accounts, life insurance, or the value of a small family business. So all that doesn't get collected on the FAFSA, which again, the FAFSA is pretty quick. You can probably fill out this form in half an hour. One thing, I do get this question: debt isn't reported on the FAFSA, except, if it's asking you the value of an investment, it would be the worth minus the debt, and that would be what you'd put on the FAFSA. But as far as credit card debt or any other debt you have out there, that's not included. So that would be a special circumstance to the college, and we can talk about that. So that's the FAFSA. Now, I mentioned that all colleges require the FAFSA. So some colleges also require the CSS Profile form. So again, it's important that students look on the website, make sure what forms does this college require, and make sure you complete all that's required. So I mentioned a lot of things that aren't included on the FAFSA. And that's why colleges that have a lot of their own institutional dollars to give to families and students really feel like they need a little more information to be able to make those financial aid offers. And that's why they require this form, which asks a few more questions and gives a more detailed picture of the family's financial situation. So CSS Profile, you can find this form at cssprofile.org. It's required by some colleges and not others. When you're sending this form to colleges, it costs $25 for the first school that you send it to, and $16 for each additional college that you send it to. So unfortunately, there is a cost to this form. But again, this is so colleges can award their millions of dollars, so it's well worth it. And this form is also available October 1st. Now, I mentioned that this is going to collect more information, and one part of that is in the case of a divorced or separated family, it's the same thing. The parent that the student lived with more in the last calendar year completes the profile with the student, and the other parent also, in this case, completes a non-custodial profile. So that information will get collected here. And again, MEFA has another recording that talks in more detail about the profile at mefa.org/events. One other piece I'll mention when I'm talking about divorced and separated families: if that custodial parent is remarried, it's those two people that complete the form with the student. And then in the case of the profile, those two people that complete the form with the student, and the other parent, if remarried, would then complete the non-custodial profile. And lastly, I don't see a lot of these anymore, but I want students to check. Sometimes colleges may have their own institutional application, and so students should just check and see, is there a form on the website, something else they need to complete? All right, so then after the student applies and turns in these applications, the colleges and the state receive this data electronically, and you as the family will receive notifications. It's being processed, it has been processed, and within 3 to 5 days, you should receive a note that says all of your information was sent to these colleges, and it will list the colleges that received it, which is great. If you want to go in and add colleges later, you can do that. So that's fine as well. Even if you want to get this form done early and just send it to 1 or 2 colleges, you can do that and add colleges later. And then just know that if you completed these forms and you feel like you have a financial circumstance that is more complicated and wasn't really reflected in the forms, you can always contact the financial aid office with any special circumstances. Now, the CSS Profile has a section on that form where you can write in special circumstances, so that's great. Colleges that just require the FAFSA don't have that, so you would have to write to those colleges and say, here's some additional information I'd like you to have when reviewing my application. You know, my dad lost his job, my grandmother lives with us, things like that, and maybe attach dollar values to them. So then verification is just a normal process where colleges are required by the federal government to verify some of the information on these forms. And some colleges, have 30% of their students that they verify, some verify more, but just know that it's a very normal part of the process if you receive an email from a college saying, can you verify this piece of information? And some will collect your tax returns and they'll give you a process to do that. So just know. So what's key is to make sure that the email address that you use, both student and parent, is one that you check and check often, because you wouldn't want to think you're done with everything, but then have the school asking you questions and holding something up because you don't answer. So just be aware that that back and forth process is very normal. And here it says, log into the college web portal for communications. We have found most colleges these days have a student web portal, and that's where students can go and check for information. So really pay close attention. Once you apply to the colleges, apply for financial aid, make sure you read everything. And, again, talking about special circumstances, the financial aid office at the college is a great resource. And so further into this process, especially, you're going to want to ask them about financial aid renewability criteria, treatment of private scholarships, can you appeal, changes in family circumstances, and usually their website will let you know the best way to reach them, a phone call, an email, or now there are new virtual options like chat and video conference. So feel like you can call the financial aid office to ask questions. And again, to be in touch with them if you have special circumstances, especially at this time. During COVID, we know that many, many families have special circumstances. You'll be using 2019 income information, and yet, gosh, for so many of us, 2019 seems so long ago and so much has happened. So feel free to write about that and share that with the colleges. They understand that, and they're hearing a lot of that from families and students. So don't be shy about that. So at that point, you'll have basically done your first huge step in applying for financial aid. And then you might have a little time to wait. But colleges know that students need their financial aid offers close to the time when they hear about admissions. So those will start to trickle in. So now we're going to talk about this from the college's perspective. How are they going to create a financial aid offer and award to your student? So this is what they do. The first thing they do is they have to figure out what the cost of attendance is. How much is it going to cost for your student to come to their school for the year? And that cost can include tuition and fees. It can include room and board if the student is on campus, books, supplies, transportation, personal expenses. So they come up with that large, and it is large, it's always going to feel too large, amount of a cost of attendance. And then from the information that you supply on these financial aid forms, the FAFSA and the CSS Profile, there's a formula, and the figure at the bottom that comes out of that formula is what are you going to be expected to pay toward college costs? what is your expected family contribution, or EFC? And it's a hard figure to swallow, because it really is not a number that anyone thinks that you have, sitting there in your checkbook ready to write toward college. It's kind of a loose number that, according to this formula across for the whole country, it's the same federal formula, and colleges have slight variations of their own institutional formulas, but it's a number that they feel that you can absorb to pay college costs given your financial situation compared to other families. Basically what it is. So it always feels high because we are expected to pay a lot toward college costs before financial aid kicks in. So just know that it's not necessarily what you'll pay, but it's good to just understand what the EFC is. There are a couple of places you can calculate an EFC, MEFA.org, or the federal website, ifap.ed.gov. Although if you do have a senior in high school, if you are a senior in high school, it's probably worth just to complete the financial aid forms and you'll know your EFC soon enough. So then the cost of attendance minus your expected family contribution is your financial aid eligibility. And colleges work to fill that financial aid eligibility with a financial aid offer for you. So let's kind of talk about how they do that. So this is a little bit of an analogy. So the college really has to come up and fill this bucket. Let's say this college costs $45,000. So if they want your student to come to their college, and in this case, I guess it doesn't say it on the screen. In this case, the family's expected family contribution is $5,000. Okay, and so the college needs to fill this bucket with a financial aid offer so that the student can attend. So the first thing they put in the bucket is, excuse me, is your expected family contribution, $5,000. Family's going to pay. And then they say, okay, this is a great student, so we're going to give a $10,000 merit scholarship to this student. We really want this student to come here. And based on need, we're going to give the student a $17,000 grant. So then they're going to give the student loan that most colleges award, $5,500 for a freshman. And they're going to give a work study award for this student. So there's, a lot of financial aid. However, it still doesn't fill the bucket. So this is a college that doesn't, what you might have heard of, meet full need for all students. Maybe they meet full need for some students, but they don't meet full need for all students. And in this case, they didn't meet full need for this student. So there's some unmet need there as well, the $5,000 unmet need. So in reality then, what this family needs to come up with for the student to be able to attend here is $10,000, the $5,000 EFC and the $5,000 unmet need to be able to send the student to college there. So this is another place I will just mention that you can go onto college websites and type in net price calculator in the search bar and find the net price calculator. You can type in some information and get an estimate of what type of financial aid you could receive. So if there are folks on the line with juniors, this is a great tool to use to just get a sense of what type of financial aid offer you could receive at a certain college. All right, so then let's look at another example. This example shows, and this is going to be very common. This is what we see all the time. You applied for financial aid, your student is waiting to hear from all the colleges that he or she really likes, and you get the admissions offer back, and now you get the financial aid offers back. And they're usually all different, which makes it very confusing and hard, but MEFA can help you with that. But let's just talk about why this is and what a common scenario would be. So in this case, the student applied to these 3 colleges, or maybe these are their top choice, really likes them. So look at the financial aid offers. The first, College A, awarded grant and scholarship, student loan, work study totaling $40,000. And if you can see, the cost of attendance of this college is $45,000, your EFC is $5,000. So college A met the full need. Still, as a family, you have to come up with your expected family contribution, but that college met full need, which is wonderful. Maybe they meet it for all students, or maybe just your student, because your student is great academically. We don't know in this scenario. College B also gave a very nice award, but they didn't meet the full need. So there's still unmet need that you would have to come up with as a family. The same with College C. They awarded even less, and you would have to come up with a little more. So it's really important, once you have all of the offers in front of you, that you sit down and you compare them side by side, and really together as student and parent have what we call a kitchen table conversation to say, can we afford this? We want to make sure that the student is happy academically, that the college has the program they need, that they're happy socially, that they are at a college that has is the distance from home that they like, that is in a city or out in a country, all of that. But it also has to be affordable. And so there, keep options and choices open, and really be open-minded about saying, I thought my student wanted to go to college B, but let's talk about it. Look at the offer that college A gave you. Let's talk with them again. Do you think that would work for you? And those are the type of conversations that you can have with your student to make sure that you're making a wise decision all around. And a couple of things here I'll say. Why do some colleges give more money than others? One is just some colleges have more money than others. We all know there are some elite private colleges that have a lot of money, and they're able to meet the full need of all students, and in some cases not even give a loan. But that's few and far between. More often, colleges don't have enough to give to everyone, and they're trying to distribute the funds as fairly as possible. But then there is that other piece I mentioned, that sometimes merit can intertwine. And so maybe some colleges meet full need for those top academic students, and meet a good amount of need, like College B here, but don't meet full need of those more in the middle of the admissions pool and near the end of the admissions pool. All students they want, but that can factor in as well. So then one other piece, and one other reason why it's really great to compare financial aid offers from college to college, is that take a quick glance at these three financial aid offers. Oh, they're all giving $35,000. Great. No. As you can see, College B and College C each have listed something called a parent loan in that offer. And I don't need to tell you this, that's not financial aid. I mean, it might be what you use to pay, but first of all, it's not definite. Any parent loan is going to require a credit check, and you can decide how you're going to pay that expected family contribution. Are you going to use a parent loan? Are you going to use some savings? Are you going to be able to have enough in your monthly budget to pay? So you need to compare apples to apples. So you want to spread out those offers and look at the bottom line, so you're comparing apples to apples and see what you're really getting, to know if you're making a good financial decision. And MEFA actually has a college compare calculator, an award comparison calculator on our website, so that's something you can use at that time as well. Colleges, I think, sometimes are well-meaning in doing that because they want to show a family what your options are so that you would be able to afford it, but I just would prefer that they show that afterwards and not as part of the aid offer. All right, so paying for college. So let's say, I'm taking you through the academic year. Let's say that you and your students sit together and you really are able to figure out student says, this is where I want to go to college. It seems like it's affordable. How do you pay it? Let's say that you compare apples to apples, and then the balance that you're going to owe at a certain college is $20,000 or something. That seems really high. How does a family pay that? Well, every family is going to pay that a little bit differently, but I'll just give an example of how one family might pay it to give you a sense. So this one family might say, well, the student has $1,000 of savings, so we'll take that. Parent has $4,000 of savings that we want to use this first year. And then, the monthly budget, I'm making this up, but we've paid off our cars. We have some extra money in the monthly budget. We might be able to pay college a little bit as we go, and all colleges have a monthly payment plan. So you can sign up for that. So you might decide, like this family did, all right, we'll pay $500 a month for 10 months to the college, and that factors in. So that's out of your current income. But then this family might say, well, that's not enough, so we'll also take an education loan. And that's of course, on top of those federal loans. And any type of loan that's on top of those federal loans is usually, the student can't take it on their own, so they usually need a cosigner. And so it's usually the parent and student on that note together. And that's just an important conversation to have about whose loan is it, who's going to pay for it. But in this case, the family said, okay, so we're going to take that $10,000, and that's how we're going to come up with the $20,000 this year. And maybe that even seems reasonable, but what this family needs to make sure they understand is that's going to happen. If it's a 4-year school, they're going to be doing this every year for 4 years. Really important to understand up front. So here are some other things that should be, in the mix of that kitchen table conversation. Let's see what other options are there. If that doesn't seem reasonable, well, one thing is you can start at a community college and then transfer and save significant money. And I'm going to show you something in a moment, but it's just something to think about. So it might be worth having numerous types of colleges on the list. Keep options open. And if dream school doesn't work out because of finances, well, let's look at the other options that will get you your same goal, get you to the same place, but just with a different route. And then, as parents, you need to consider the number of children you have. Do you have 2 more students coming up to go to college after that? That needs to factor into some of those decisions. And again, making sure that you're not just getting the student to school in September. You have to think of 4 years of financing. Good to calculate that post-graduation monthly loan payment, which I said with the federal loans would be about $300 a month. If the family takes on additional loans, they have to make sure they understand, okay, so will we pay that as parents? Will we have the student pay it? Will they be able to pay it? Will we be able to pay it? Those are the conversations. And I guess what's factored in there is, does the student have any idea of maybe what their career path and job will be? Many, many don't, but some do. So a student might know that they're going to be an engineer and they're going to attend a college that is very open about the fact that their students have very high starting salaries. Okay, so maybe that student knows they're a hard worker. They're going to attend a school that has high starting salaries. They're going to be an engineer. Maybe they know they can take on a little extra debt. So that can factor in. But other students, maybe there's a student who knows they want to go right to graduate school afterwards. Do they want to maybe keep their undergraduate loan at a minimum? Things like that. Also, it's good to know what your credit score is if you're planning to borrow a private loan, because sometimes your credit score can affect the rate you'll be able to receive. So again, you really want to do some comparison and be very thoughtful about this decision. And again, I always just tell students and parents, keep an open mind and keep your options and choices open. It will stop that heartbreak that can happen. All right, so we mentioned that community college piece. So Here in Massachusetts, we have a program called Mass Transfer. And another part of that program is also called Commonwealth Commitment. And this website is great. It describes the program well. But basically, it's that a student starts at a community college, transfers to a 4-year, and has automatic admission, tuition credits, freeze on tuition. It is a very affordable way to attend college in Massachusetts. And there's financial aid on top of all of those cost savings. So check out that website. It's just worth keeping that option open. And then there's another program called Tuition Break. And what that allows is if a student goes to a state college or university in another New England state outside of Massachusetts, because that state has a program that Massachusetts doesn't have, and there are a lot of them, they can receive in-state Massachusetts tuition. They can pay in-state Massachusetts tuition to the out-of-state college. So that's another great website to check out. All right, some other free resources. I'm talking to you about getting those financial aid forms done. And so the FAFSA is your first step. And if you need additional help, we do have these events called FAFSAday.org. And you can go to that website, FAFSAday.org, and there's going to be 7 virtual events. They used to be in person, and people could bring all of their information and sit at the computer with an expert and have help. We can't do that this year, but the events are going to be virtual and they're going to be experts able to answer questions. So maybe get started on the FAFSA. You can save it as you go along and then ask your questions, bring them to these virtual events and get them answered. And they're going to be 2 in Spanish as well. And there are also educational opportunity centers all over the state. You can go to massedco.org. That's another place where you can get virtual help. And I think they may even have some in-person help with distancing rules. So check that out as well. So what can you do right away? You can get an FSA ID. That's the username and password for the FAFSA for the student and the parent. Research those deadlines and what applications are required, or take my advice, which is just get these done in a relaxed way over the next couple of weeks. And then know that MEFA has lots of webinars on a lot of topics right through this year. So we have a large plan at mefa.org/events, but some of the things I talked to you about, comparing award letters, deciding how you're going to pay that bill once you've decided, all of that, we will have webinars on that in the spring to help you make those comparisons, figure out if you want to use savings, figure out if you want to borrow a loan, how to borrow. And then our website and our blogs, we have so much information. Please use it. You can also connect with us on social media. There are all our handles. And you can always call us or email us with questions. And we're getting a lot of questions these days, so we just welcome them. We are here to help you. So with that, I am going to check now the question and answer, the question box, and get to your questions finally. All right. Oh, someone asked about the closed captioning. We have many other webinars. We're doing the same exact webinar 4 times a week. So on Monday and Wednesday, we do it at noon. And on Tuesday and Thursday, we do it at 6:30 p.m. And so lots of other options. I know that sometimes the closed captioning cuts off the bottom of the slides. I will be sending you the slides, but this webinar was especially promoted with closed captioning, so we wanted to share that tonight. But you can also watch another one of these webinars. Yeah, so this next question is about an appeal. A parent is now unemployed and wasn't in 2019. When do you let the college know that? So Again, when you complete these financial aid forms, the FAFSA, you're going to be giving all 2019 information. The profile is going to ask you what's estimated 2020 income, and you have that special circumstances box. So you can write all of that information in the profile form about unemployment and estimated 2020 income. But if the college is just collecting the FAFSA, you probably want to send an email to the colleges saying, again, dear financial aid administrator, here's some additional information I would like you to have when reviewing my file. And add in all of that information about the change in income so they have it. Great question. So someone is asking if the state has any programs for children of veterans. So, off the top of my head, I don't know anything specifically, but check on the MEFA website and put in the search, scholarship aid, veterans benefits, veterans scholarships. I think we've written a blog on it, and we have a few places that you can look and go to find that information. Organizations that may have more detailed information about that. Oh yeah, so someone is asking, where can I go to watch this afterwards? So I'm going to email this to you tomorrow, so you'll be able to watch it again. Or, as I mentioned, we are holding these live presentations 4 times a week through November 6th, and we'll hold them after that as well, but maybe not 4 times a week. So feel free to watch this again tomorrow, share it with parents, share it with anyone, or watch the next one that we'll have. Oh yeah, so good question. So where do the parents get parent loans? Great question. So let me tell you about the options there. So there is something called a parent loan for undergraduate students, a PLUS loan, and the college will probably tell you, share the website with you and tell you can go there and apply for the PLUS loan, which is an option. MEFA also has private loans, so you can go to the MEFA website, and we have really good options for loans with a very low interest rate, and lots of options about, do you pay immediately, do you pay just interest immediately, or do you wait till the student graduates? Lots of options there, so you can check out the MEFA website. And then if you have a bank that you do business with, you can see if they have an educational loan. The college may also give you a list of either lenders that they have worked with and or these, what do I want to call them, like a loan site where you can type in information about what's important to you in a private loan, and it will give you options. So there are all kinds of options. So at that point, once you've made that decision in the spring, you can start looking into those different options, and MEFA can help you with that. As I said, one of our webinars we have is called After the College Acceptance, but you will have many options for borrowing. Oh yeah, so good question. When you're filling out the FAFSA, do you put the value of your bank accounts on that day or from last year? It's that day. So you're using your 2019 income, but when you are completing the FAFSA, the asset value is on the day you're completing the form. Wonderful question. Oh, another good question. When the student is filling out the admissions form, do we let them know that we're unemployed now, or do we wait until the child is accepted? I would wait. They won't look at all this information until your child is accepted. So you could, especially if you're filling out the CSS profile, you could put all that information in the special circumstances box. They can have it. It'll be sitting there waiting. But they won't look at this information until your child is accepted. So another option, if it's a FAFSA only school, would be to wait. And when they give a financial aid offer, for you to then, when your child is accepted and you get your financial aid offer, to then say, I have some special circumstances. So either one. But I guess if you have very specific information now, put it into the CSS profile. You can write a letter, or you can also wait until your child is accepted. Yeah, so this is great. And I've had this conversation recently with a lot of folks. Do colleges award their aid first come, first serve? So in general, if you meet the financial aid deadline, you are good, and you should be applying for everything that you're eligible for by meeting that deadline. Don't miss the deadline, not even by a day. But if you meet the deadline, you should be fine. However, I have heard of a couple of instances of some colleges offering some additional incentive for families for students to apply early and get in their financial aid applications early. So again, it's something to look at on the college websites, because I would hate to tell you nobody does first come, first serve, because I have heard a couple of instances where people do. That is not the norm, but check on those websites and see if they say something like that, like there's an early application incentive. But other than that, in general, if you get the forms in on time, you're not going to have a problem. Same for CSS Profile. Yeah, so in this case, if it's one parent with an adopted child, that is absolutely fine. That's how you can file the FAFSA and the profile. Again, you might want to explain some of that in the special circumstances information. I did mention on the CSS profile that sometimes they're looking for the other parent to do the non-custodial parent forms. And let's say, I sometimes hear of circumstances where the student will say to me, I don't have contact with my other parent. I don't know my other parent. And so in that case, colleges have a waiver of that process. So ask for a waiver of the non-custodial form. But in this case, where that doesn't seem, of this specific question, that doesn't seem like relevant, but I just wanted to share that you can waive the non-custodial form, but in this case, single parent of an adopted child is just fine, and maybe explain that in the special circumstances. No problem with that at all. So I think I'm going to wait one more moment, see if I see any other questions. I thank you all. Those were terrific questions. I think universally good. And I wish you all good luck. And please know there's a lot of help with this process. Continue to stay in touch with us and ask your questions. And we are here to help you through all of it. So thank you and have a good evening.